Hi, Ian.
Oh, oh,
How are you
hello.
today?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Good. Glad to hear it. I'm doing good
Yeah.
too. All righty.
Sorry for being a little late.
Oh, it's okay. I thought maybe you didn't have the link saved, or maybe you didn't
Hmm.
realize it's the same one each time. So
Yeah.
no worries at all. Yeah, so tell me what you have done since our last session and what were some of the things that stuck with you since our
Mhm.
last session, the things that you felt like really, locked in with you and that that were things that you remembered and were like, I gotta log that away and use later. What were some of those
Mm.
things that stuck with you?
So I mostly did what you kind of outlined from your last email. So
Yeah,
I looked over those practice scripts. I obviously
great.
sent in a couple recordings of them.
Hmm.
Um, for most, I would typically do like every other day for around half an hour to an hour um,
Yeah, okay.
of mostly those practice scripts. Uh,
Right.
and maybe some like smattering of character works or
Mhm.
impressions or things like that. Uh,
Yeah.
just because part of, I think, the goal of what you were kind of sending over was
Right.
that I'm supposed to like find the fun in it to kind of
Mm.
propel like other aspects of doing it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
So the stuff that stuck with me. So number one, I find that I get really, I don't know if I necessarily want to say trapped, but I feel like
Okay.
somewhat trapped in certain like rhythms, I guess,
Sure.
in terms of like voiceover,
Yeah. Okay.
especially narration, I would say,
Mm.
because a lot of it feels like it should be paced out similarly and
Okay.
read in similar tones, because if you go too far outside the bounds, like in character work, then it kind of, you know, becomes a more challenging to listen to over long periods of time, I would say. Um,
Yeah.
so that kind of stuck out to me. I feel like I have a similar kind of cadence and rhythm,
Okay.
especially in, I think it was the light fantasy script that I sent. I
Yeah.
had that feeling whenever I would practice or record that. Um,
Hmm.
and then for some of the other ones, one that I kind of struggled with was the more conversational, um, like horror kind of themed, the
Oh,
apartment one,
yeah.
right? Um, so I found that like there were certain parts that I was okay with, like in terms of listening stuff out and being more conversational. But then it
Mm.
like I feel like later on in the script, I just kind of reverted back to the similar cadence and all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
So like I guess the biggest things that stuck out with me is like how to change up the cadence or make it, more varied per script, I guess, maybe more accurately. Um,
Yeah.
and just yeah, like that. I think that's my biggest, I guess, thing I want to think about right
Mm.
now with the stuff I've practiced.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Okay. So, um, yeah, so then when we think about for today, then the things that you would say are your main goals for this session, what would you
Mhm.
say those would be?
Well, number one, to go over those practice scripts, like the recordings that I sent, like getting those critiqued. Um,
Right. Yeah.
I
Okay.
guess
Yeah, we can
two
definitely do that.
would be um, like as I guess a consequence of that, see if there are any changes or any sort of like little things I can tweak about it and like
Right. Yeah.
perform that maybe. And
Mhm.
then last would be uh just like maybe I don't know if philosophy is the right word, but just like
Mm.
maybe overviews of some narration techniques or strategies.
Right.
So I
Yeah.
don't, because I'm like I don't feel uncomfortable with it necessarily, but I don't feel like I'm an expert at it. You know.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So then, um, Yeah, so let's start with that. Let's go ahead and take a look at the recordings first, and
Mhm.
then we'll go from there. Okay, so we'll
Right.
we'll start with that because that's like we know we want to do that, and then we'll kind of feel
Mhm.
out, what we want to do moving forward from there. Okay.
Right.
Yeah, so okay. Did you email it from
My the email I typically send you with
yeah,
the
okay.
Mario. Yeah, yeah, that
Yeah,
one.
that's what I'm checking right now.
Okay.
Okay.
Just to make sure.
Uh,
Oh, actually, I think I might have sent you a text message.
oh,
Um,
okay, got it. Great. All right. So that's why I was
yes,
like,
I
I'm
did.
not
I did
seeing
send
it.
you a text message on Friday. That's what it
Got
was.
it. Okay. Huh. Let me see. Oh, you're right. I did listen to these before. Yeah, so yeah, let's take a listen again just to kind of like refresh our memories on them,
Right.
and then we will go from there. Do you want to, just so that we can both listen to it at the same time with a little bit better audio, do you want to play it on your side through the Zoom and share your audio, and then we can listen together at the same
Um,
time? Does that
I'm
sound like
on
a good?
my laptop.
Oh, okay. Never mind
So
then.
I
Yeah.
don't think I'd be able to share it
Yeah,
in
no
that kind of
worries.
way. But I still
Yeah.
can on my end since I still have them saved.
You can still
Uh,
listen. Yeah.
I can
Okay,
still
great.
listen to them.
So
So
I'm
just
gonna switch headphones actually so I can listen in a little more detail and we'll just
yeah,
listen at the
same. I'm
same
gonna
time. Yeah. All
yeah.
right.
Sorry, just some headphone tangling.
Mm. Okay. I took some notes as I was listening just to kind of help
Mhm.
me to remember everything as we were going. Um, sorry, I
Yeah.
just realized you can probably
Yeah.
hear me a little bit, but I wouldn't be
Um,
able to hear you. I had to switch back.
re really quick,
Yes.
before we get into your criticisms, because there was one
Yeah.
more thing that I remembered.
Yeah. Tell me.
So, maybe not the first thing we focus on, but one
Okay.
thing to focus on is
Right.
that I feel, in terms of like the similar cadence tone thing that I was talking about, I think a
Yeah.
big like hurdle for me right now
hmm
is um when I don't have some sort of like voice director. I feel like I give
Mm,
very similar takes a lot of the time when I'm doing recordings. So I find that like
yeah.
one thing that I'm like I latch onto who I like the way that kind of sounds. And then it's hard
Right.
for me to break out of that habit. Um, on like
Ah.
subsequent ones, which can be kind of an issue because sometimes the thing that you grasp like latch onto first isn't necessarily what the script calls for, right? Or what the read calls
Yeah.
for. But yeah, so sorry.
No,
Um,
yeah, absolutely. Um, right. Hmm. So then, yeah, so it's like you get comfortable in it and you're like,
mhm,
just as a general narrative flow, I really like the sound of this, which
mhm.
I agree with. I definitely could see that. I do, though, feel like these scripts are very different from each other, which is
Yes.
where we want a little bit of a tone shift. So,
Mhm,
I would say probably half the jobs you get, they're just going to want you to sound like yourself. They'll
mhm.
just want you to sound like an engaged, attentive, interesting version of yourself, interested and interesting version of yourself.
Yeah.
But then occasionally we get scripts that we need something a little bit different, right? So you can kind of be your default narration sound. I
Mhm.
would say, at least half the time. And then there will be times, though, that we have to tweak that sound a little bit. Um, with narration, I never go so far away from my natural sound that it becomes too laborious or not sustainable for the whole
Mhm.
project. If it's a
Right.
really long project, I'm going to go, okay, what can I sustain through it? Right. Um, so I would say the first clip right now, I really love it exactly the way it is. I think it
Okay.
sounds really beautiful. I was like, oh, this is great. And as
Thank
like
you.
your general narrative tone, I think it's a beautiful flow. So some of the things I took in my notes were I love your vocal tone. I feel like a lot of the, singing background you have, your breath control, the resonance that's coming across and it sounds really um maybe like elegant almost in the way
Mhm.
you approach it. It
Yeah.
sounds very polished, but not in an unapproachable way, which is
Mhm.
really lovely. I really like the pacing. I said the narrative flow was really nice with paying attention to your phrasing. Um, like where you're placing breaths, where you're pausing, where you want it to be smooth and connected. This is one connected thought. I also really appreciated the attention to the specific words that you felt like were more important.
Mhm.
And you definitely put points of view in there, but it's nuanced. It's not ever overbearing. It's very subtle. So
Mhm.
it shifts the emotion without it being distracting. It's really nice.
Right.
Um, so that was all very lovely. For the second clip, so the one that's slightly longer, one of my first thoughts was, oh, okay, I definitely hear how you felt like it sounds very similar because you
Mhm.
kind of, I would say it kind of needs to warm up into it. Um,
Mhm.
at the beginning, I thought, oh, okay, we just kind of sound like we have the same voice that you just did the other one in. Um, I felt like where you changed. There was a very clear shift for me at I told myself I was done. And to me, that was when this one really took off. I was like, oh, okay, this is where this one changes. So it's
Hmm.
like it took you a while to kind of warm up into the script. And when you
Hmm.
got to that line, I was like, oh, okay, big attitude shift. And that's where I really felt like it was compelling. If the issue is, if you submitted this for an audition, they would have heard the beginning and been like, and next, and they wouldn't have gotten
Right.
to that part. So, a lot of the time, if you're choosing this as for yourself, going, okay, want this to be a really compelling clip I sent them, or I want this to be a part for my reel. I
Hmm.
would say chop off all the stuff before it and start it right there because it felt a lot more active and like I was really in the scene at that point. And I was like,
Right.
oh, okay, here's that character coming out. Um, I did feel like towards the end, though, it started going back to the flow from before.
Hmm.
Um, and the thing is, sometimes the script is really helpful that the way it's written is very active. And so it's
Hmm.
easy for us to get into it. Um, so I would say just overall with the second script, I feel like it needs to have a little bit of a more heavy or ominous kind of a feel, just
Hmm.
generally across the board. So I would play a little bit with pitch, maybe just dropping your pitch a little bit. So if, my default pitch is here, maybe I drop it to here as I read through this one, and then play with your speed as well. I felt like this one is a little bit more dramatic. So I felt like in the first one, I really liked the consistency of the flow and the pacing. And this one, I thought, if I was doing it, I feel like I would change the pacing more. So play with, maybe on this phrase, I'm a little bit slower. And then on the next phrase, maybe I start to escalate a little bit, but then I pause and then maybe I'm slower again. And then
Right.
here, maybe I start to ramp it up and ramp it up and ramp it up. And now I'm faster and faster. And now I'm here. Right.
Right.
And so I felt like there was a little bit of room for playing with the speed changes and also maybe dropping in pitch a little bit. And I might even play with a little bit of, um, I felt like there could be a little bit of like a rawness or a gruffness that comes into the voice at times too.
Hmm.
Um, or maybe like a bitterness, like on that line, I told myself I was done. Maybe we put
Right.
like a little bit of like a gruff quality in the voice a little bit more, or like a little bit punchier. So I just felt like we could play a little bit more, as too, I feel like as the narrator is the character,
Hmm.
um, it can feel a little more like character lines rather than
Yeah.
just narration. Yeah.
Hmm.
So
So,
I really like the first
mhm.
one. The second one, I thought, it's a good start. And you have some moments that were really beautiful. And then I was like, ooh, okay, there we go. Like if you showed this to me and were like,
Right.
I want to use this for a reel, I would probably chop off the beginning and I'd chop off the end and I would keep that section starting it. I told myself I was done until like right before the end. Um,
Yeah.
and I would say this is like the most compelling, exciting, engaging part of it.
Hmm.
Um, and so, that's okay. That's great. We've got some golden moments, but I feel like we can improve overall the whole thing. What
Right.
what would you say from what my feedback was are your thoughts? Do you agree with
Well,
certain things? Do you disagree with certain things?
so first and foremost, I have a question.
Okay,
So,
absolutely.
kind of like a topic you kind of, uh, you know, not necessarily glossed over, but kind of brought up
Yeah.
without necessarily bringing it up is the idea of
Mm.
script interpretation. So, on that topic, how strict should script interpretation be for like, commas and breath points and everything like that? Because a part of it seems, critique is like playing with pacing, right? And like uh I don't know, like maybe the viciousness of the read and everything. How much is that restricted by what the script is like literally quote unquote saying versus the interpretations and like how boundless or not is that, I guess.
Yeah. I think that's a good question. So one of the things that I would say if I like summarized a question I get pretty often is,
Hmm.
okay, as a narrator, aren't I just supposed to read what's on the page and just say what
Right.
the writer has given me? Yes. However, it's your job. The reason they hire you is because they want you to bring it to life.
Hmm.
And so we want to try to put ourselves in the author's shoes and kind of embrace our imagination a little bit more.
Yeah.
And we are the lens through which people are going to see this, right?
Right.
And so it's not my job to just read it off the page. It's
Hmm.
my job to create the world. It's like all the things that they would be seeing if they saw this in a movie.
Hmm.
I'm creating all of that with my voice. So the words, just the words, are like a screenplay.
Right.
But with my voice, I have to create everything they'd be seeing, all of that cinematic music in the background, setting the tone. I'm creating that world for them. And
Hmm.
all I have is my voice. So I have to go in and imagine that world and be able to create it for them and showcase that with my energy, with my mood, with my pacing, with my flow, with my pitch, with
Hmm.
the way that I pause and the way that I speed up or accent something. So I have to be able to create that world somehow, which
Hmm.
is kind of a little bit daunting, but also it can be really fun. So
Right.
it's embracing your creativity. If the author just wanted it read off a page, they could just do it themselves, right? The
Right.
reason they hire a voice actor is because they say, you're imaginative, you're an actor, you're used to bringing life to something that's just words on a page. So
Hmm.
that's why they hire you. And the reason I sometimes get disappointed when they have like film actors or Broadway people do voice acting parts is because I go, if they had hired someone that's like specifically a voice actor,
Hmm.
they would get so much more. Like sometimes I'll listen to a book that's read by some famous person who, does does film stuff and I'll be disappointed. Sometimes I
Yeah.
listen to them and I'm actually pleasantly surprised. I just listened to a book that Meryl Streep narrated and I'm just
Hmm.
like, this woman can do no wrong. She did a beautiful job creating that
Yeah.
world. And I mean, it was lovely. It was beautiful. And this was a book where it had like somebody in their life, like later in life, and like their late 50s, early 60s, but then they also went back in time to when they were younger, like college aged in their young adult years, and we're telling stories from that time. She did such a great job with all the different character voices, and it was great. So I was like,
Hmm.
no complaint here. She was amazing, right?
Right.
But sometimes we get people who, they're used to acting with their facial expressions, their gestures, their posture, those kind of things. And
Hmm.
so then their voice, I feel like I'm missing a little something here?
Yeah.
And I go, oh, I really wish they'd hired somebody that does more voice acting.
Hmm.
Because of just that ability
Yeah.
to somehow immerse you in that world just with
Right.
their voice. And so I think that's with this second script, what I wanted a little bit more. And you did
Hmm.
at that point that I told you I told myself I was done. I was like,
Yeah.
oh, there we go. There it is. I got so excited in
Hmm.
that moment because I was like, oh, yes. Okay. I
Yeah.
was like, all righty, we're in it now. So it just was like I was waiting for that. And it
Hmm.
was a very fun moment when I was like, "Oh, we're there now. You got it." Like you took a breath and you said that line. I was like, "Yes."
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, just
Eh,
like I said, it kind of took you
hmm.
a minute to warm up into it. Um, and so, sometimes I remember in college, I had professors, one in particular, who he would say, "Okay, we're gonna take this monologue you have." and I'm gonna like chop it up and rearrange it. And so he would be like, let's take out these lines and let's like reformat it so that it's much more compelling and
Mhm.
active. And he'd be like, yeah, starting on this line is not compelling or active. Yeah, you know what? You get to this point and I feel like it's done, and then you keep going. He'd be like, we don't need the rest of it. He'd be like, end right here because it's a really strong ending. And I just remember like at the time being like, but I memorized all that stuff and you're just chopping it out? And I'd
Yeah.
be like, but now it's only like a 30-second monologue instead of like a minute 20, and I
Mhm.
worked so hard on it. But he was right. It's better to do like in an audition setting that
Yeah.
short, really impactful section, which is why I said if I was going to cut this and put it in your reel, I would have you
Mhm.
just start there. But ideally, sometimes you get things that are scripts that they're like, do the whole thing for
Yeah.
your audition. And if they gave you this, you have to find a way to make that opening and that ending your strongest points of the whole thing, because that opening, they know in the first like 5 to 10 seconds if they want to hire you. I'm just being
Mhm.
honest.
Yeah.
And so you have to make that first moment, grab them and suck them in,
Mhm.
right? And then fingers crossed, if they listen all the way through the end of your audition, you want them to feel like, I want to hear more. So we have to make
Right.
that last final moment a moment where they're like, oh, yes. And then like
Yeah.
disappointed that it's over?
Mhm.
So making that very initial moment and that final moment super compelling and really grabbing them is essential. And so
Mhm.
that's what was really missing here with this one. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I
I
mean,
would
I
love to work on that a little bit today.
absolutely. I mean, I think I agree with most of the criticisms.
Yeah.
I would say that like um trying to take all that into account, like the getting warmed
Mm-hmm.
up essentially for that one part. Um I hmm, like let's say I did like a blind reading of this script for an audition, right?
Yeah.
And that first part, I'm like, I don't really feel the like kind of, I'm not
Mm,
necessarily in touch with the character just yet or the perspective. And then I get to a
right.
part that's like, oh, okay, well, now I get it. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what is maybe a method to make that kind of connection happen faster and
Mm.
last throughout a script instead of it just being like a fleeting moment somewhere in the middle?
Yeah, yeah. Um, so so one thing that I always try to ask myself when I'm diving into a script, I really like to give myself a really strong beginning, middle, and end
Mm-hmm.
with auditions. And And I used to, when I was younger, think, okay, I just need to do it the way I'd do it if I got the job. If I'm in
Mm-hmm.
this play, how would I say this script? If I get booked for this narration job, how would I actually read it if it was in the context of the book?
Right.
And so that's what I would try to do. That unfortunately didn't get me booked very often. And I was like, why isn't this working? Once I get the job, I know what to do.
Right.
Um, and so in that audition, we have such a small window of time
Mm-hmm.
to impress upon them, I can do this job, right?
Yeah.
And so I have a short script, just this little, snapshot in the context of the whole thing. Right. And so my job is to show them I am capable of all these different things in this short, like 1 or 2 minute long audition. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm trying to say, okay, here's what I sound like when I'm happy, when I'm sad, when I'm angry, when I'm scared. Here's what I can do with this character. Right. Here's the character voice for this character. Here's that character. And it's not me trying to say this is the finished product. It's me
Right.
saying, here are some of the things I could bring to the table. Here are some of my skills. And I want to showcase as much as I can that could be an asset for that production in that small window of time.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying to say, all right, at the start, I'm going to be nervous and scared. And then in the middle, I'm going to get angry. And then at the end,
Yeah.
I am just going to be so disheartened and sad. right? And
Mhm.
then that way they get to see, oh, okay, she isn't just a one-trick pony. She's got all
Yeah.
these different layers that she can dive into. And it's not that I'm saying this is how I'll actually do this in the context of the project,
Hmm.
right? Like I got really confused when I first had that kind of feedback, and I was just like, but that's not how I do it if I was cast, you know?
Right.
But it's not about that. It's almost like, if you go to a job interview, you're
Hmm.
trying to say, here are all the different things I can bring to this position. Here's how I would be an asset to your company, right?
Hmm.
And they're trying to say, here are all the reasons our company is great and why you should want to work for us, right? And
Hmm.
so it's not just like going in and being like, I'm going to be the best I can be for this, 10-minute interview.
Yeah.
It's saying I need to be able to say like here are things I've done in the past. Here are reasons I think your company is great and why I'd be a good team member. Here are things that I bring to the table. So we're looking at it like that. As an actor, I'm saying here are all the different things I bring to the table. Here are all the
Yeah.
reasons you should want to work with me. And for them to really embrace all of that and to learn who I am and what my skills are, I can't just show them, just this one snippet. Um,
Right.
One of the really great pieces of advice I got in undergrad, actually, with one of my coaches, um, she was one of my musical theater teachers.
Hmm.
Uh, I did like musical theater literature classes with her. But she said every time you take a breath, she said it's like your character has a new thought. So every time you take a breath, you're looking through the phrasing and you're seeing commas, semicolons, periods, question marks, exclamation points.
Hmm.
Every time you have that punctuation mark and you take a breath, your character needs to have a new thought. So that moment is a moment of inspiration. And so there's some kind of shift that happens every time you take a breath, some kind of emotional shift to break me out of just that habit of like just going with what I thought it would be. I would give myself like a list of actors' action verbs. And I would say, okay, so I'm accusing, and then I'm begging, and then I'm cheering them up, and then I'm demanding, and then I'm encouraging
Hmm.
them, and then I'm flirting, and then I'm goading them on, and then I'm harassing them, and then I'm just joshing with them, and then I'm
Right.
kicking them, right? And then I'm
Yeah.
lifting them up, right? And
Hmm.
so I would, every time I took a breath, I would change my action. Another way you could try it is just assign emotions, like a list of emotions for yourself. And so you
Yeah.
say, okay, the first line, I'm going to say, like, I'm happy, right? A
Hmm.
time methinks too short to make a world without end, bargain in. And then I'm going to be sad on the next one. No, no, my lord, your grace is perjured much. And then I'm going to be angry, full of fear, guiltiness, and therefore this, right? And then I'm going to be
Hmm.
scared. Sorry, then I forgot where I was. If for my love, right? Um,
Right.
so yeah, so I would go through the script and arbitrarily just go through a list of emotions or actions, and I would change
Hmm.
so that I would just break myself out of that habit of just doing what I think I should do, right?
Hmm.
And then, break myself out of that habit, then go back and say, okay, what do I feel like actually makes sense as an
Yeah.
action here? So I say, okay, for that character I was just saying the monologue for. Um, and I think about this situation and like, what is she feeling? What does she want in this moment? How does she feel about the person she's talking to? So then
Hmm.
I start assigning action words to each phrase that make sense for the character, right?
Yeah.
So at first, I am denying him, right? I'm saying, no, no, my lord, right?
Right.
No.
Yeah.
I'm saying no, right?
And you
And
try to
then
emphasize that like emotion
yeah, and then I
based off of
actually
that.
am calling him a liar in the
Hmm.
next line. So it's like I'm calling him out. Your grace is perjured much, right? So
Hmm.
I'm saying
Right.
you are lying.
Hmm.
Right? So my first impression was like, "Oh, I'm talking to my fiance and I'm in love with him and I'm sad my dad just died." But I'm like, I literally just said no and I called him a liar, right?
Right.
So thinking about what she's actually saying,
Hmm.
what would be my action there? right? I'm calling you
Yeah.
out for lying to me, right?
Yeah.
And then she says, full of dear guiltiness, right? And so I'm
Hmm.
like saying, you feel guilty, and I love you for that, right? So maybe there I'm like comforting him, you
Yeah.
know? And then I say, and therefore this, like she has made a decision and she is telling him what it is. So she's like, all right, I'm laying down the law, right? So that
Right.
could be my action there. Um, and then she says, if for my love, as there is no such cause, you will do aught. So she's
Hmm.
saying, if you really love me and you'll do what I ask you to do because you love me. So she's like, maybe she is like, let's make a deal. Maybe they're bargaining here,
Hmm.
right? So maybe she's bargaining with him in that moment. And then she says, basically, like it boils down to, she's like, you're gonna leave me alone while I handle all this crap with my dad dying,
Yeah.
right? She's like, here's how I see it. So I feel like she's like presenting some options and she's like, here's what I need to do. So I
Hmm.
need you to go away, right?
Yeah.
And so I go, what is her action there, right? Um, and then she's like, but hey, once I get all this figured out, once I handle it, I'm going to contact you. We're going to get married. It's going to be beautiful. I love you so
Right.
much. We're going to have a great life, you know?
Hmm.
So it's like she's having to be like, I love you, but I'm the princess and my dad just died and there's no one to run the country and I have to handle all this crap, right? So
Right.
she's like, yeah, I want to marry you and I love you. But right now, the country and what's happening here is more important than us just getting what we want and being in love, right?
Hmm.
There's more at stake. So she has to navigate all of these things, her grief, her love for her future husband, her
Right.
feelings of obligation to the country. And so going, all right, there are a lot of layers here. And what is she doing in this moment? And so every time she takes a breath, I have to say, okay, there's some kind of shift here for this
Hmm.
character. So when I was listening to the first chunk of that second script you sent me, I was like, it all just sounds
Hmm.
the same, right? So
Yes.
it's like you started with a feeling or emotion, you just kind of stayed in that same feeling or emotion. And the
Hmm.
first time I heard any kind of shift was when you said, I told myself I was done. And so I
Hmm.
was all excited when I heard that because I was like, ooh, okay, something's happening. The thing
Right.
is, you could be fully engaged, but if you stay all in the same emotion, you're going to lose your audience. We
Right.
are so overstimulated now. We need those shifts and those changes.
Hmm.
So I'm going to challenge you to every time you have an audition script, give yourself a strong beginning, middle, and end. So I come in and I am all excited. And
Right.
then I get mad. And then by the end, I am forgiving them, right?
Hmm.
So that is a really clear beginning, middle, and end of how this is going to go. And then if I also add, every time I take a breath, there's going to be I have some kind of new thought as a character, then
Yeah.
that keeps it just constantly rolling the whole time. Yeah. And it
Hmm.
keeps it exciting. It keeps the audience on their toes. They never know what's going to happen next. Yeah.
Hmm.
So anytime you feel like, that's kind of boring and I sound all the same. You're going to pull out your little handy tool belt and say, what's going to help me make this a little more compelling and exciting for my
Right.
listener? Yeah.
And
Um,
like, so for practice, it's just I'm trying to like wrap my hand around it.
mhm,
Um, so in the practice kind of sense, just playing around with it, regardless of what the text says or what it feels like should be
exactly.
appropriate, is kind of what you're aiming
Hmm.
for. And then after that, it's like, okay, now I'm going to
Yes.
reevaluate it. All right, this
Yes.
character is in a really disparate situation. So
Yeah.
this is how they'd be feeling. And then it's very clear here that something is irking them even more. So making it
Hmm.
darker, slower, what have
Yeah.
you,
Right.
the like emphasize certain emotions
Hmm.
or feelings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like how the first script, you kind of stayed in the same mode for the second one. You just need to shake
Hmm.
it up. So do
Yeah.
anything that helps you just shake yourself out of that. Like
Right.
read the script super exaggeratedly slow and then read it as fast as you possibly can, right? And so
Right.
it's just anything that just breaks you out of that or like, hop on one foot while you read the script. It's just anything that just breaks you out of that mode and that kind
Hmm.
of habit and just I'm on this track, right? You just want to shake it up a little bit and then try it again fresh is the idea there.
Right.
So, sometimes people are like, okay, let's say you're like emotionally just like a wrung out dish rag, right? And you're
Yeah.
just like, I got nothing today. Well, then I'll do things like I'll say, okay, I'm just going to play with my speed variation. So
Hmm.
I'm going to read this first line nice and slow. Then I'll take a breath, and the next one's going to be really fast. And the next one's maybe more medium. And then
Hmm.
the next one's going to be slow again. And then the next one maybe is more medium. And then I'm super fast on the next one, right?
Yeah.
So that's another way you can sort of break yourself out of that, just like I'm in this mode, right?
Hmm.
Is you give yourself things like that, or you give yourself things like, I'm going to play with my pitch variation. So on the first phrase, I'm going to be lower. And then I'm going to come up on the next one. And then maybe I go back down. And then maybe on the next, I'm going to come up and I'm going to go down, right?
Hmm.
So I'm
Right.
just playing with shaking it up in some way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
just to break yourself out of this, like, I'm in this zone and this is my pattern. I'm in
Right.
this pitch and I go this speed, right?
Hmm.
So it's just shaking yourself out of whatever mode you're in. Yeah.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
let's take that second script
Okay.
and let's try just some exercises with it this first time. So, the
Okay.
first thing I want you to try with it is we're going to try playing with your speed. So,
Hmm.
every phrase, you're just going to change your speed in some way. So, you're going to say a phrase, you're going to take a breath, and then you're going to change your speed. You can also play with the lengths of your pauses as well. If you feel like that's too much to think about, then just focus on changing the speed on each phrase.
Right.
Okay?
Okay. So just to be clear, I have the script, is
Yeah.
why I was bringing out my
Great.
phone.
Yeah.
What is it? So the first one you just want to play with tempo, and
Mm-hmm.
then subsequent ones we'll see how it goes, essentially.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All
Yeah.
right. This is the dark script, correct? I just want to make sure
Yes.
I'm
Correct.
yeah.
Yeah.
All right. It was supposed to be over by now, but the city doesn't sleep. It festers. Every scream, every gunshot, every whispered deal in the shadows. It all bleeds together until you can't tell where the nightmare ends and the waking begins. I can still smell the smoke from the fires they said were contained. I can still see the glow, orange, pulsing, reflected in the glass towers that used to mean something. Now they're just tombstones, polished and proud, standing over the graves of the people who built them. I told myself I was done, that I'd buried the badge, the gun, and the man I used to be. But when the call came in, her voice on the other end, everything I'd locked away came clawing back out. Now I'm standing in the rain again. Same street, same smell of blood in the gutters. Only difference is, this time, I know exactly who the monster is, and he's wearing my face. When the last light fades, I'll be there to meet him. I'm
Yeah.
not sure if I like changed up the tempo enough on some of those, but I tried at least like giving more focus to that. Um,
Yeah. That was really nice. Good. I definitely heard the adjustments you were making and um like the changes throughout.
yeah,
Every time you took a breath, you changed the speed on the next phrase. And it definitely made my ear just like perk up a little bit more and be like, oh, what's going to happen next? So, yes,
right.
absolutely. So, the next thing I want you to play with is let's play with the pitch. So, we're going to
Okay.
vary our pitch. So, just on each phrase, you're just going to do
Yeah.
something a little bit different as far as your pitch.
Regardless of like text accuracy and all that kind of
Exactly.
stuff, right?
Yep.
Okay. It was
Because you
supposed
never
to
know
be,
what
yeah.
discoveries you might make. You might go, oh,
Absolutely.
I never would have thought to do it that way, but I
Right.
really liked
Like
it.
maybe even a dark character sometimes has just a moment where they kind
Yeah.
of push the bounds
Right.
um, of their brooding, I guess.
Hmm.
Okay. It was supposed to be over by now, but the city doesn't sleep. It festers. Every scream, every gunshot, every whispered deal in the shadows, it all bleeds together until you can't tell where the nightmare ends and the waking begins. I can still smell the smoke from the fires they said were contained. I can still see the glow, orange, pulsing, reflected in the glass towers that used to mean something. Now they're just tombstones, polished and proud, standing over the graves of the people who built them. I told myself I was done, that I'd buried the badge, the gun, and the man I used to be. But when the call came in, her voice on the other end, everything I'd locked away came clawing back out. Now I'm standing in the rain again. Same street, same smell of blood in the gutters. Only difference is, this time, I know exactly who the monster is. And he's wearing my face. When the last light fades, I'll be there to meet him. I kind of went for a mix of like normal, like in my voice, and then some kind of pushes here and there of deepness and resonance and all that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
Um, I'm not sure how it sounded, but uh, I think one thing that I definitely feel from both of the scripts that I or both the run throughs we did is that I felt like my interpretations were naturally changing based off
Hmm.
of stuff like speed, pitch, and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Whereas like before, when I was in that comfortable kind of quote unquote like Zen state, it was more like, I mean, this is obviously the only kind of interpretation I have here because I'm reading it in the same way every time,
Yeah.
right? Whereas this
Hmm.
time it definitely felt like, especially on the speed one, I felt that there was okay, if I'm reading through some of these things faster, then I need to pause or like emphasize in this kind of way,
Hmm.
essentially.
Yeah. 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 So can you point out maybe one spot that you were like, oh, okay, I wouldn't have thought to do it that way. But yeah, I thought that was really interesting.
The
Yeah.
so the like third line in there, every scream, every gunshot, every whisper, deal in the
Hmm.
shadows. I was typically reading that in a much like slower, emphasized on every like
Yeah.
like phrase and between commas and stuff. But
Right.
then this time I was kind of like what I would feel if I didn't have this exercise, that I'm just reading
Yeah.
over it and not emphasizing the parts enough. But in reality, I
Hmm.
think it maybe, depending on the script, obviously, it could show a sense of like rushedness or like anxiety or something to read through
Right.
something that dark that quickly, right?
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
and I didn't really consider that as much before because I had this idea of what the script was wanting me to say without
Hmm.
actually like engaging with different possibilities, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. Right. So we just get more insights. We think of
Mm.
things that we're like, I wouldn't have thought of this before, or, you learned something new. You're like, I feel like this speed really doesn't work for this. Like it needs to
Yeah.
be a slower speed. And that's great. We got some insights, right? And
Yeah.
that was one of the things that I thought originally too is slowing it down and maybe lowering the pitch a little bit would just kind of generally be good ideas for this script. But yeah,
Mm.
by doing the exercises, you were like, "Oh, I feel that. I
Yeah.
really get it now." Yeah, it
Mhm.
just like sinks in better. Nice. Um, I'd love to go through and play with the pauses a little bit more.
Okay.
So, play with instead of the pauses being kind of the same length, I like to look at it and go, okay, if it's a comma, maybe it's just a little tiny lift. Like it's not much of a pause. It's
Yeah.
just a little sip of breath, right? If it's a period, maybe it's a little more final feeling. If it's an exclamation point, I make sure to really make it sound like there's an exclamation point at the end
Yeah.
of the phrase. If it's a question, I be sure to question, right?
Hmm.
And pause so they can really reflect on that question, even if it's rhetorical. They ask that question in their head. So I try to really pay attention to the punctuation and not make all the pauses be the same, but have them feel a little
Yeah.
bit different each time.
Would
Yeah.
you say that as well with the commas? Uh,
Yeah.
so like even if it is just like a moment of brevity, that it's
Hmm.
still like sometimes you change the spacing and the yeah, I guess interpretation of those.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So then, um, yeah, so thinking about even if it's like, okay, there's a whole bunch of commas, we still can look at them and go, okay, this is a comma after a prepositional phrase. This is a
Yeah.
comma bridging the gap between two full sentences connected by an and. So to me, I go then, all right, so if that's the case, then I
Yeah.
think of that as going, okay, a comma after a prepositional phrase, linking it to the full sentence is
Hmm.
going to be a little sip of breath, whereas a comma connecting two full sentences, I probably pause a little bit more.
Right.
A comma that's between like apples, oranges, and pears, that I probably make even just a little teensy lift. And I be sure to say, okay, like I feel differently about the apples, the oranges, and the pears, right? I be sure
Right.
to try to make those sound like different things that I have a different point of view on, right? So watching what's happening in the sentences, and that can affect how long or short of a lift you have as well.
Hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
So focus on pausing.
Yeah,
All
exactly.
right. It was supposed to be over by now, but the city doesn't sleep. It festers. Every scream, every gunshot, every whispered deal in the shadows, it all bleeds together until you can't tell where the nightmare ends and the waking begins. I can still smell the smoke from the fires they said were contained. I can still see the glow, orange, pulsing, reflected in the glass towers that used to mean something. Now they're just tombstones, polished and proud, standing over the graves of the people who built them. I told myself I was done, that I'd buried the badge, the gun, and the man I used to be. But when the call came in, her voice on the other end, everything I'd locked away came clawing back out. Now I'm standing in the rain again. Same street, same smell of blood in the gutters. Only difference is, this time I know exactly who the monster is, and he's wearing my face.
Mm.
When the last light fades, I'll be there to meet him. Um,
Nice.
I guess
Yeah. I
like
heard some of those phrases in a
like
very
much
different way
clearer
than I
and yeah.
ever have. Yeah.
Mhm.
Nice.
I think that was probably the hardest one for me
Okay.
in terms of like figuring out ways to vary up pause length, I
Mhm.
guess. Because in the other ones, it felt more natural in terms of like, oh, if my pitch changes, then maybe I say it in a different kind of way. Whereas
Yeah.
when it's a pause, it's like I could feel myself trying to go back to those old habits. And I tried to, even if some of those old habits were correct, quote unquote, interpretation, that I'm just trying to like figure out ways to vary it up. And I think that was the hardest one for me to uh like between what I was saying and what I was thinking, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Um, yeah, I actually felt like for me, that might have been my favorite of the takes so
Right.
far, just because there were moments that I was like, I feel like every other time it's just kind of glossed by that and it like really hit home
Yes.
for me. Sometimes the pauses, like if you stop for a moment in the flow and then you keep going, it just makes the next thing you say more important or more
Right.
weighted. Um, so for me, that actually was my favorite so far because I was like, whoa, I
Yeah.
heard moments of this that I really haven't like heard before, you
Yes.
know?
Yeah.
And so for me, it actually was the most impactful take. Um,
Hmm.
which it's interesting to go, you as the narrator were feeling less comfortable, but I
Yeah.
would say this isn't really a script that is a comfortable script either,
Yes.
you know?
Yeah.
So it's like if you feel really comfortable, maybe that's not what you should be feeling for this
Right.
particular script either,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Um, so I kind of like that you were like, I felt less comfortable this
Yeah.
time because I'm like,
Maybe that's what it is then, because
yeah.
I feel like in the lighter script, I feel
Yeah.
like a lot of the ways I was like pacing it out and everything kind of lined up with the way I think and
Yeah.
feel that kind of setting. Whereas I
Right.
don't necessarily connect with this character as much as I did
Sure.
the light fantasy one, because I'm not
Hmm.
as surprisingly, I guess, not as dark and brooding and you
Right.
know uh
Yeah.
like I'm contemplative, but I'm not, like to a serious extreme of thinking about like harm that's been done and all this kind
Right.
of stuff that this character was
Yeah.
thinking of.
Right. And so, maybe early on, you maybe focus your auditions more on things that you would feel a lot more adept at, that you're like,
Yes.
this would be my comfort zone. Just while you're kind of getting your footing. I honestly know people who are excellent and very successful, but they're kind of one-trick ponies and they're
Yeah.
like, this is what they do. They do it very, very well. They're known for it and they get hired to do that thing over and
Right.
over and over again. And I think that's great.
Yeah.
And it doesn't even mean that they can't do anything else. It just means
Right.
that they play to their strengths. That
Yeah.
being said, as an actor, I like to keep things interesting and keep myself challenged. And then also sometimes I get opportunities for things that I go, oh, this would not have been something that I would have thought I'd be cast for, but okay, here I am,
Hmm.
like getting cast to play a grandmother voice. And I'm like, I am
Right.
shocked that you picked me, but okay, here
Yeah.
we go, you know? And it's
Hmm.
like, all righty, I'm gonna give it my best shot. And it's like, okay, well, you must have liked something I did in my audition,
Right.
And so I just like put my best foot forward and go for it. And they're like, oh, we loved it. And I go, that is
Yeah.
not something I would have guessed I would be chosen for. Um,
Hmm.
but I think it keeps you as an actor challenged and stretching yourself. And,
Yeah.
you know,
And you're
so
less
like
likely
it,
to get in those habits if you're
mhm,
constantly like, even if you don't get the roles, like
stretching yourself. Yeah.
auditioning for a grandma role or like a
Right.
baby or
Yeah.
something is just naturally going to
Hmm.
do that.
When I'm short on time, I
Yes.
tend to focus on auditioning for the things that I'm like, I feel like this is more my niche, right?
Mhm.
But let's say I haven't had a new job for a little bit and I'm like starting to be like, ooh, what am I
Yeah.
going to do next? Like I'm wrapping up these projects that I've got currently and I haven't been hired for anything new for a minute, you know?
Right.
And then maybe, I say, well, I have more time because I have fewer projects right now, so I'm going to audition for more things. And maybe I go for things that are a little more like out there that I'm like, I don't usually get cast for those things, but let's go for it.
Mhm.
Or if I just get bored and I just want to mix it up, then I'll throw my hat in the ring on something that's more of a challenge. Like, um, I got this thing for Universal Press that was like a very academic research, like history and anthropology and
Yeah.
looking at like cultures and things. And it was like every sentence I was having to look up words.
Yeah.
And I was like,
Pronunciations
ooh,
and all
this is
that.
tough,
Hmm.
And so that was a big
Right.
challenge, but I was happy to do it because I was like, I learned a lot through this process.
Yeah.
So it's like I'm not sorry that I did it. I was afterwards like, I'm gonna go for some like light, easy
Yeah. I'm gonna
things
do like a
now, like
children's
some
book
happy
now.
commercials, like a
Yeah.
children's book, a romantic comedy.
So I quick question about that. So in like the anthropological kind
Hmm.
of reads, right?
Yeah.
You have the script in front of you, obviously. Do
Yeah.
you like annotate it at all? Say this is the pronunciation or focus on this or anything like that?
Yeah. So a lot of the time I'll actually I usually do everything on either my iPad or on a laptop, just like or like on other screens or whatever, just so that I have
Yeah.
it electronically. I don't like to print anything out
Mhm.
just because I would be printing so much. Um,
Right.
I actually, if I'm playing something like in a play or for a film or something, I do like to
Yeah.
have paper copies of the sides for that. But for voiceover, I usually don't. I usually go in and like make all my notes and things electronically. But I
Mhm.
do go through and like I try to prepare and say, okay, I'm gonna like really work on this page, make sure it's solid, take notes if I need to. That way I'm
Mhm.
not constantly like stopping and being like, wait a minute, how do I pronounce that again? And like looking
Right.
it up. And there were like some Native American names and things that I was like, wait a minute, I just said this 2 paragraphs ago, but I want to make sure
Yeah.
I'm saying it right. So it's easier for me to go in and like say, okay, every time there's this word in the script, let's like have it replace that word with the phonetic spelling or something, and
Okay.
I like
Yeah, that
go
makes
through and
sense.
make notes to myself.
Yeah.
Or some scripts don't really have punctuation marks, and I hate
Yeah.
that where it's like big
I've
run-on
noticed that in
things,
some of
and I'm
the
like,
ones I've looked up online because that was another thing I did, like in terms of practicing, uh,
yeah,
is that I noticed that the scripts you chose, thankfully, have pretty
right.
like nice punctuation and everything. I didn't realize how
Hmm.
much of like a blessing that was in these ones in particular
Yeah,
because
sometimes they're
looking
not.
them up online, they're just run-on sentences, and
Hmm.
that becomes a lot harder because
Yeah.
then like sure it's up to your interpretation one way or the other, but
Hmm.
like having some amount of direction in the script, I feel is a
Yes.
lot more helpful.
Yeah, I like to go through and write marks for myself, like, okay, I'm gonna take
Yeah.
a breath here, I'm gonna take a breath here, I'm gonna take a breath here. So I like to go through and add punctuation for myself a lot of the time. So
Mhm.
I will, especially if it's like, something that it's just like, this is so hard. I'll go through and fix it. You'll even sometimes get things where it's like, I don't think they meant this word there.
Right. Yeah.
So, like, I've had people sometimes be like, okay, I know like intellectual property and like, so if it's something that I feel like is obvious, like that should be and they wrote I'm
Right.
just gonna say the right word. Um, Sometimes I will actually write back to like whoever the director, the publisher,
Mhm.
whoever, and I'll be like, hey, I noticed this. I think it's supposed to be this. Is that right? Do I have a go ahead to like fix any little typos like that
Yeah.
that I see? Um, because the thing is, if I read it the way it's written, they're going to come back to me and say, redo this because it's supposed to be that.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
so a lot of the time I just check with them. Um, there are certain things like if you're working with really big companies, you have to go, okay, this is something that's like copyrighted. If I'm working for Disney or Marvel or something, it is this. And like you
Right.
have to do word for word exactly as it's written.
Yeah.
So there are certain situations where it's like it must be exactly as it's written. Then there are times where it's like, I feel like English is not this person's first language. And then I'm like, hey, so I noticed some typos. I offer editing skills for this extra little fee,
Mhm.
and I'd be happy to go through and edit it for you.
Right.
So sometimes I'll do that too, or I'll be like, "Eh." But then other times I just go through and I'm like, I'm just gonna fix it.
Right. Yeah. And just kind of hope that it's okay based off
Yeah.
of the project that you're working
And I,
on.
I
Yeah.
mean, I'll let them know. I'll be like, hey, I noticed a
Right.
couple small typos. I just went ahead and fixed those in my reading of it. If
Yeah.
you want to check it, here's the file or whatever.
Mhm.
So, I communicate with them, but yeah.
Right.
If it's something that I read that I'm like, this is bad, then I'll offer editing services.
Mhm.
I'll be like, hey, I noticed there are quite a few uh errors in the grammar and punctuation. I
Yeah.
do offer editing services for this small fee added on top.
Mhm.
Let's see what they
I
say.
guess just a facet of the job,
Yeah, I mean
typos happen.
it makes it a lot easier for you as the voice actor if it's
Yes.
written well. So yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I try to go through and mark it for myself. Um,
Mhm.
okay, so from today, what would you say are your key takeaways? The things that you're like, all right, these are things that I want to lock in my brain and
Mhm.
keep, and I want to work on this week.
So I think the big like umbrella thing is
Hmm.
just to play around with the script more and be comfortable even if it's
Yeah.
technically wrong. right?
Yeah.
Just to see, to feel out certain ways things could be phrased or played with.
Right.
Um, so I think that's thing number one. I think
Hmm.
thing number two, then, um, I'm not sure if, I mean, I guess like you were talking about like finding your niche, right? So
Yeah.
maybe doing more, some more recordings of those either practice scripts that you gave me or ones that I find,
Sure, yeah.
and trying to, and like sending those in, I guess, to go over and see if like based off of the feedback today, as well as maybe some fresh scripts or fresh kind of ideas and stuff, like how
Hmm.
that plays out. And then I guess from there, like potentially moving either to like actual auditions or getting stuff ready for like some like a very basic demo reel. I think would be the best.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So what I was thinking this week, maybe work on that second clip again this week. I
Mm-hmm.
really like the first one, so maybe continue to work on the second one and then find an additional different script that you feel like is more in your wheelhouse, that you
Yes.
feel like it just comes a little more naturally to you. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
because the thing
Yeah.
is, the things that come naturally to you are going to be harder for someone else. Early
Yes.
on, I was like, oh, I want to get really good. So I was constantly pushing myself to get really good at
Mm-hmm.
things that were not my natural strengths, which did help me to grow. But at the same time, I could have been capitalizing on the things that came much more easily to me because they don't come easily to other people, right?
I think
And
that's why
so leaning
I
into the
wanted,
strengths.
yeah, I think that's why I kind of want to do narration first, because I think
Yeah.
character work is where I want to end up in terms of maybe the thing I want to focus on later or the things I'm most compelled by, right? But I think narration has been something that has come to be more naturally in terms of the way I read
Yeah.
and interpret scripts.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that like starting with narration and then trying to move into the more difficult stuff to navigate is um like why I chose this kind of pipeline.
Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
for sure. Well, I look forward to hearing
Yep.
the recordings after you have some time to
Yep.
work on these. And I would say I probably would recommend choosing a script that like feels like it's in your wheelhouse more, but that also is a little bit different than what we did
Right.
this time. Just,
Mhm.
so that you have a little bit of variety in there too. It'll
Yeah.
keep things exciting for you, but it'll also kind of help you to like play to your strengths, feel good about what you're doing, but then also to stretch a little bit, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
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 Okay. Well, thank you so
Awesome.
much
Yeah,
for this week.
absolutely. Yeah.
I know today was kind of a hectic day, but
Yeah, it was a weird
um
day. Sorry about that.
yeah, yeah.
It was like a lot of hurry up and wait for me today. So thank you
Yes.
for your understanding of that. But I'm so glad it worked
Absolutely.
out to meet.
Yeah.
And I think you're on a great track. So try to have fun with it. And one thing that I might play with if I were you too this week with that second clip is play with
Mhm.
some character inspiration. So find some people that you think, I really admire this actor. I think they do a really great job with it. And sort of try to like imagine how they would read it and then play with the script the way they would play with it. So if you go like, okay, how would Morgan Freeman do it? How
Right.
would um George Clooney do it? How would, Heath Ledger do it? And then
Right.
you try it with their kind of energy and attitudes. And I think
Mhm.
sometimes that kind of also takes off that pressure on me. It's like, oh, I'm just trying to do what they would do, you know? So
Right.
like it doesn't
Yeah.
feel like it's me so much. I don't judge myself so harshly. And again, it's just a way to kind of shake it up, play with it a little bit more and have fun with it. And then also you're channeling people that you admire, which is pretty fun. So
Right.
yeah. So
Okay.
maybe try that with the second one this week too.
Absolutely. All right.
Like if you were like, okay, I'm gonna play it like, all the different people who've played Batman, it could
Right.
be kind of fun,
Yeah.
and just gotta see what comes out of you because you might surprise yourself.
Right. And I was definitely surprised with some of the ways we changed it up this week. So yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, that was fun. It was really fun to hear the changes. So, yeah, keep playing with it and you'll stumble on things you go, nope. And you'll find things you go, ooh, I kind of like that. And
right,
you just kind of pick and choose then. So acting is kind of like a game. It's a lot of like trial and error and just like see what works. So,
right. And
yeah,
then
you
over
just gotta
time, you
kind
kind
of,
of accrue enough
hmm
experience where you're like, oh, okay. I mean, I've done
yeah.
similar things like that before. So yeah,
Right. Yeah. You go, oh, I've done scripts similar to this. Yeah. And then you just sort of
mhm.
like, pull that character out that you did before. Yeah,
Right.
exactly. hmm
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well,
Just
thank you
be
so
like, I
much.
like this, bottle it, keep it on the shelf, pull it back out later.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Well, awesome work. And
Yep.
I'll plan to see you in a couple weeks. And just like whenever you get some recordings that you want me to listen to, send them my way. Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Alrighty. I'll see you
All right.
soon, Ian.
Yep. Bye
Bye
bye.
bye.